Hello, my name is Eric, and I'd like to tell you the story about how I found my dad's 1955 Chevrolet Bel Air Sport Coupe 52 years after he sold the car. This is a picture of my mom and dad taken probably 1967 or 68 while they're dating. They would later marry in November of 68. The picture was taken by my grandmother, my mom's mother, and this picture was taken at my grandparents' home, the home of my mom. And so this is the only picture I have of my dad's 55 Chevrolet when it was painted black and white. Now, my dad bought this car as his first car, and he bought it when he had just turned 19 years old. I believe he paid about $950 for the car in 61. He didn't even have driver's license when he bought this car. In fact, his very best friend, Jack, drove the car home for him from the used car lot that very day. And so when Dad bought the car, he had to finance the car, and his dad signed for my dad to be able to finance the car. Dad bought the car as all original. Had the original paint, the original engine, the original transmission, the original hubcaps, the original interior. And it had the original 265 engine. It had the original manual transmission with the column shift that most people today call it the three on the tree. Had the original hubcaps. And so Dad put the 327 engine in it. He changed out the column shift, the three on the tree, to a floor shifter. He would oftentimes swap out the hubcaps that he was running, and here pictured is the 58 Chevrolet hubcaps. He had a complete set of what were called in the 60s the full moon disc hubcaps. I actually have two of those full moon disc hubcaps that Dad ran on this 55. Have them in my office hanging up today. Well, Dad sold the car a year before I was born in 1970, and so the last time he actually saw this car was in 1975, and it had been painted solid purple. It had completely new interior in it, which was solid black. And so growing up as a young boy who loved anything that had wheels on it, well, my dad would tell me stories about this car that he had, this 55 Chevrolet Bel Air Sport Coupe, and the places he went in it, and at times how fast he drove the car. He got it up to 110 miles an hour once going downhill. And so I just fell in love with 55 Chevrolet Bel Air Sport Coupes. They are called Sport Coupes from the factory because they are made like a convertible, except they have a hard top. And thus, many people just simply call these cars a hard top. They don't have a B-pillar in them because they are made like a convertible. Now, the cars of the 50s, 60s, and most of the 70s, if they have a B-pillar, which is a post that's attached to the door and separates the door from the rear frame of the car, then that's called a sedan. But this particular car is a sport coupe, and thus it is called a hardtop today by most people. And so it's my favorite style and trim level of a 55 Chevrolet. And so I looked for this car for years and years and years. Growing up as a teenager and then into adulthood, I would ask people if they'd ever seen a black and white 55 Chevrolet, or if they've seen a purple 55 Chevrolet, or if they know where there's a 55 Chevrolet sitting in somebody's basement or their garage or in a field or in the woods somewhere. And I tried to locate this car but never could find this car. A few years ago, my mom found the original bill sale for this car. It had my grandfather's signature on that bill sale for my dad to finance the car, but it also had the VIN number of the car, which is specific to a specific car. And so even though I had the VIN number for the car, I still could not track down this car until May of 2022, when a couple friends of mine were able to locate this car for me, and I was able to contact the owners of the car, Scott and Fran. And they were so excited, so glad, and were just overjoyed that I was able to locate the car that my dad bought when he was 19 years old. My mom and dad dated in this car. And they were married while my dad owned this very car. And so it's my very favorite car. And so they were so kind, so generous that they drove the car to the church that I pastor in Morganton, Georgia, so that my mom and dad could see the car and enjoy the car again. Here is a picture of my mom and dad on October the 8th, 2022, staying in front of the very first car my dad ever bought, a 1955 Chevy Belair hardtop. My mom and dad turned 80 in 2022, and I created them a stand to put the picture that you just saw of mom and dad standing in front of dad's 55 Chevrolet when it was painted black and white when they were dating. And so this was just a fun day for my mom and dad, and for me also, that they get to see and enjoy this 55 Chevrolet once again. This is a picture of Scott and Fran, the owners of the 55 Chevrolet, arriving at our church property for a Cars and Coffee event that our church does on the second Saturday of every month from May to October. Scott and Fran drove 2.5 hours one way so that my mom and dad could enjoy this car and that I could see it and enjoy it as well. That just speaks volumes of their character and what a nice people they are. We are so thankful and glad that our paths crossed, that we could become friends with Scott and Fran, and they are some of the nicest people you'd ever want to meet in your life. Here is my dad getting to talk to some people and enjoy sharing stories with the car that he owned from 61 to 1970. This car was a showstopper. Many people came by to look at this car and enjoy it, and Dad just had a great time, and I think everyone who saw the car was just amazed at how beautiful this car, how well restored, and the type of quality of the restoration the car had undergone. It is absolutely phenomenal. Well, I looked this car over from top to bottom, from front to rear. In fact, I even crawled up underneath the car and looked at it. The car is just perfect in every way. I didn't see a flaw in the car whatsoever. The chrome is just beautiful. The paint is just amazing how deep it is. The interior is just perfect. It has a solid black interior. It's leather, very, very comfortable interior. It has the smaller style steering wheel, still original, but a little bit smaller. Makes it a little bit more comfortable to sit in the car. And 55s are just beautiful inside and out, I think. And this one is one of the prettiest and best restored 55s I've ever seen. It has my absolute favorite wheels of all time, those being Krager SS chrome wheels, size 15. And this car it's been restored exactly right. Has a 350 cubic inch engine that's been bored 30 over. That makes it about a 358. It has a Borg-Warner transmission, 4-speed Borg-Warner transmission. It has a loping cam, which means it's a mild cam, and the cam in it gives the engine a sound to it as if it has a little chop to it, or a lope that most people call. It's because of the amount of duration and lift that the cam has, the camshaft, and so it sounds great. The car has power rack and pinion steering. It has 4-wheel disc brakes, power disc brakes, has air conditioning. This car has been done right, and it is amazing looking car, and it drives great, and it handles great. Has front and rear sway bars on it, and so just amazing to get to see this car, how well it's done. My mom gets to ride in the car, and of course my dad's going to take it for a ride as well. This was just a great day for Iceland. Boy, did it Well, here my mom and dad are getting in the car, and dad is going to drive the 55 Chevrolet that he bought in 1961 for the very first time in 52 years. I'm going to be sitting in the back seat of the car, and I apologize in advance. I was not using a cell phone. I was actually using a video camera, but the video camera could not handle the amount of volume of the wind and the engine, and so it distorted. The sound distorted very, very bad. It would be way too annoying to try to hear that sound. But this was a treat for me to get to ride in this 55 Chevrolet that was Dad's first car. I'd never seen this car before. October the 8th, 2022. My oldest sister, she was born in 69, and we believed that as a baby she would have ridden in this car. This was a lot of fun, and Dad's driving the car around the parking lot of the church and around the property of the church. The car has the Borg-Warner 4-speed transmission, and many people today would think, well, that's kind of awkward and difficult to change gears, but this car drove great with a 4-speed transmission. Usually a car that has a mild cam in it and a 4-speed transmission or even 3-speed are a little bit difficult to drive, but this car drove great, even with the 4-speed and the mild cam in the engine. That makes it a little bit more difficult, but Dad actually has a 57 Chevrolet Belair hardtop. He's on now for almost 2 years, and it has a 4-speed transmission. It's actually a T10, Richmond gear T10, and his 57 has a mild cam in it also with a 350 engine. But Dad was a little bit nervous about getting it out on the road. He didn't know if he wanted to do that, and I talked him into just go ahead and take it up the road here a little ways. And so we're going to make a circle around the church property and go up the road just a little ways with the car. The weather for that day could not have been any better whatsoever. Just perfect weather for us. While Dad's driving, he and I are talking about the brakes, and I'm pointing to him where he can turn to go down the back portion of the property of the church. And we're talking about how it steers compared to his 57 and the brakes. And the disc brakes are just amazing. And it makes this car feel like it's a more of a modern car. The Tri-5s, which most people understand them to be the 55, 56, and 57 Chevrolet Belairs, are probably the most popular at car shows and cruise-ins. They are extremely valuable today and well sought after. Many people had these cars when they were in high school or a little bit out of high school, and so they bring back a lot of memories for people. My dad's turning into the back of the property here, and this is just what we think is a once in a lifetime experience to get to drive your first car again. And so to share it with my parents and for me to be there is just something I can't explain just how neat it was. And as people say how cool this was to do this. It was just a great, and we are so thankful for Scott and Fran for letting us have this much fun. I'm going to point to Dad to tell him exactly where to park. We were doing some cleanup here for the event, and I give him some directions exactly where he needed to park here. He did great with this car. Did fine. Now it's going to be my turn to take a drive in the 55. This is something I've looked forward to all my life. This obviously is a dream come true for me. Hey folks, I am sitting in the 55 Chevy that my dad bought, 1961, his first car. We found this car and the owner so graciously let me drive it today for the first time. It's only the second 55 I've ever driven in my life. All right, here we go. Catherine and Caroline are riding with me. Woo! I like to get fun. And there I go in the 55. A little bit hard for me to take off with it. Didn't want to over rev the engine. And it has the Hurst 4-speed shifter, and those are always a little bit tricky. They're kind of stiff. They're made for drag racing, so I drove the car around the parking lot for just a little bit and got used to how the car drove and the clutch. And this was a lot of fun. My two daughters in my dad's first car. Couldn't ask for anything better than that. We're going to Myrtle Beach. Well, we made it back safe and sound, and that car drove fabulously. I got it out on the highway, drove it quite a bit more than Dad drove the car. I just wanted to see how well it drove, and boy, it did not disappoint. And yes, I did get on it just a little bit. Sorry about that, Mr. Scott, but the temptation got the best of me. But we had so much fun on this day, and what a dream come true to get to drive this car that Dad sold 52 years ago. And we are so thankful for Scott and his wife and their generosity of bringing the car to make a dream come true for my mom and dad and for me as well. Well, folks, that's not the end of the story. I had a surprise for my mom. This is a picture of her 1964 Ford Fairlane 500. In 1964, she bought this car brand new, obviously, and her dad bought a 64 Ford Galaxy 500. Mom was in a car accident with my grandmother and totaled this car, but she had insurance on the car and was able to get another one just like her first one. And so her first car, or actually first two cars, were 64 Ford Fairlane 500s. They were both green cars, and the color of the car was Dynasty Green. This is my mom and dad leaving the church that they were married in. My dad would not drive his 55 Chevy Belair hardtop to the church because he did not want it messed up. And so he hid his car. In fact, when I got married, I hid my Monte Carlo Super Sport also so that no one could mess it up. And we drove my wife's Ford Taurus away for our honeymoon. And so this is a picture of my mom and dad getting ready to leave the church and go on their honeymoon. And we're not so sure exactly what happened to this car. I'm not sure if they owned the car when I was born in 71 or not. I do not remember this car at all. But Mom had this car for quite some time, and so I had to surprise her a little bit. This is my friends Dennis and Donna, who own this very, very nice, beautiful 1964 Ford Fairlane 500. I met Dennis and Donna through our Cars and Coffee ministry, and so I asked them if they would do me a huge favor to bring this car on October the 8th when Dad's 55 would be at the church so that Mom could see a car exactly like her very first car. Dennis tells me that this car is originally not a white car. It is actually, from the factory, was painted the same color that my mom's first car was, Dynasty Green. This car is very, very nice. It has a strong motor. It sounds really, really good. And so I surprised my mom by having a car there like her very first car. And we are so thankful for Dennis and Donna. They are examples of fine people who, again, have blessed us as a family with their kindness and generosity. Well, here is Mom sitting in the 1964 Ford Fairlane 500, and she's enjoying this. Now, I do not make it a habit of being around Fords or being seen sitting in a Ford, much less driving a Ford. However, Dennis told me I should take my mom for a ride in this car. And so I did. There were a lot of people standing around in absolute shock and laughing at me because they know that I'm an absolute diehard Chevrolet man. But this was a treat for me and a huge surprise for me that Dennis would let me drive his car. And so I did take my mom for a little short drive, and I was so surprised that the room in this car, I'd never sat in a 64 Ford Fairlane 500. I had no interest in them at all, other than I knew that was my mom's first car. But I was pleasantly surprised at the power, how the car drove, and it drove really well, rode very well also, and this really was icing on the cake to be able to drive my mom in a car just like her very first car. What a great day this was and a fun time that we had together.